It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Welcome back to the program. We got Congressman Rick Crawford is back with us. Rick, how you doing this morning?
I'm good. I'm enjoying that particular selection, wondering if that is you're trying to send a message there or what, but that's a pretty good song.
Yeah, it is. No message, no hidden meaning at all. But so tell us, we're in the midst of this government shutdown. What are your thoughts on everything?
Well, I think what you're going to see now is Pelosi is completely and totally intransigent. Chuck Schumer is essentially using her to buttress his position, knowing that as long as she remains unmoved, then he gets cover politically. And meanwhile, here we are, day 2021, and they have no willingness to address border security. And I just look. I mean, you can't. We've been getting calls on this steady for now 21 days. 81 point whatever, almost 82% in my district are saying build the wall, hold fast. Now I'm hearing from other members similar situations where that's the read they're getting from their district. And just so people know, I mean, we track every call. We record every call. I mean, in terms of we're not recording the voice, but we're annotating the call and the message of what the caller has, and so we're keeping track. And 82% is pretty overwhelming in my district that are saying hold fast, build the wall.
Wow. And
it's I think people ought to know that. I can't speak for the other districts, but you know, we're watching ours pretty close, as you can imagine, and that's the sentiment we're getting. And I wouldn't say that if it weren't the case. I mean, look, if my job is to represent the First District of Arkansas. I know other districts have different issues and they have different perspectives. I don't live in California, but even in California, there's look at the police officer that was just recently killed by an illegal. That has changed the narrative to a large degree. So it's an impasse that's very easy to fix, easy to address, and we have a speaker who just refuses to even begin to negotiate. She's just absolutely, president comes up and says, hey, if we open up the border, if we open up the government, can we talk about border security in 30 days? No? Okay. What's he supposed to do? Is he supposed to stay in the room and continue when you get that type of response? I mean, at this point, it's up to him. And now you have Lindsey Graham saying he's encouraging the president to use executive authority for an emergency declaration so that we can do a couple of things. One, primarily get the government back open. And two, using his authority to, on the national security front, to secure the nation. That's his responsibility. That's our responsibility as representatives. And as those of us who took an oath to support and defend the Constitution, is to keep our nation safe. And I just can't imagine why for a pretty good idea, if I can just, a little inside baseball, she's terrified of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Really?
Oh, absolutely. And so why she continues to keep this position is because the progressives on her side of the aisle, that is the new the antithesis, if you will, of the Freedom Caucus in the Republican conference. And the problem is, though, that the Freedom Caucus doesn't have the media actively supporting and advocating their position, whereas the Progressive Caucus on the left does. Not only does the Progressive Caucus continue to grow on the Democrat side, but they continue to build media support that creates a problem for Nancy. So that's why she's doing this. She's voted for these things multiple occasions, just as Chuck Schumer has, and now she's holding down a position as though her political career rests on it, and in fact, it does.
So the inside baseball, we're talking with Congressman Rick Crawford. That makes President Trump's statement yesterday before he left for the border when he said the Democrats have been, quote, taken over by a group of young people who, frankly, in some cases I've been watching, I actually think they're crazy. That might be referring to Nancy feeling like in order to maintain power, she cannot. And she's called the wall immoral as well, Congressman Crawford. And they claim the Democrats right now want to eat their cake and have it. They want to say we are against the wall because the wall is immoral, but we are for border security. And my question is, if the wall is immoral, then isn't border security immoral also?
Indeed, because, they talk about the wall, and they're trying to get the president to recognize that the wall metaphorically can be addressed through technology and increased manpower. Okay, if we stipulate that that's the case and we increase and enhance border security, but you've already said that the wall itself is immoral. And so what you're saying is it's immoral for nation states to exist because what you champion is open border policies. And if that's the case, we have no country. So whatever you say a wall should consist of, whether it be a physical structure, whether it be enhanced technology to interdict illegal crossings, whether it be more personnel on the border, any and all of those things, the wall, metaphorically speaking, is immoral. So but what you're hearing from these Democrats that say the wall is immoral is that they don't recognize our national sovereignty and our responsibility to protect the citizens of this nation. Not only do they not recognize it, but they actively reject it by calling it immoral. And so what we have are bigger problems here, societally, that we're going to have to wrestle with above and beyond just trying to keep the nation secure. So I totally respect their right to their opinion under the Constitution, however ill-informed and misguided it may be. But the fact remains that in order for them to enjoy that constitutional right, we have to maintain our sovereignty, and that requires border security. So you see the irony of their position?
I absolutely do. I absolutely see it. It is extremely ironic. And, we're in a situation here where the Democrats, I think, are all over the place, and they've made this about a personality. They don't like President Trump, and so they are now going back on everything they've once said. We have audio. We played it in the first hour of Barack Obama calling it a crisis, a humanitarian crisis. Well, now they are trying to say, well, the President Trump, he's wrong. It's not a crisis on the border. It absolutely is a crisis. We have, what Bill Clinton said in the 90s. We have what Hillary Clinton said about illegal immigration. We have Chuck Schumer in his own words saying illegal immigrants should not be treated, or illegal aliens shouldn't be treated the same way as people who've come here legally. All of that is out the window, all because of who won the presidency in 2016.
Well, it's interesting, looking back at, all the comments that people like Barack Obama and Chuck Schumer and those others made about border security and Hillary Clinton, how important that was. And I think it's important to recognize, their historic positions on this and how they have, quote unquote, evolved. But there's a piece in the Atlantic. It's called "In Case of Emergency," and it was written by Elizabeth Goitein, the co-director of the Liberty and National Security Program, Brennan Center for Justice. She writes this piece talking about here's what it would look like if the president declares an emergency and starts to act on executive authority. She lays out the case for why this is so bad, but she uses historic precedent going back as far as Abe Lincoln. She uses Abe Lincoln as an example where he used executive authority to preserve the Union. She uses FDR as an example. He used executive authority to take action during the Depression, which was, in fact, exacerbated and prolonged under his tenure. Also, his pre-World War II actions, he used executive action. But she goes on to qualify that these two were good presidents. So therefore, we can overlook any extra constitutional considerations in those cases, but we're not going to overlook anything extra constitutional under this president because we don't like it. Now, that's the subtext. She obviously didn't say that, but she clearly makes the distinction that it's okay if we like you as a president, we being the liberal left and the media, if we like you as a president, we're willing to overlook anything you do, even if that means extracurricular constitution or extra constitutional action, i.e., DACA. A president, for example, who wants to rule by pen and phone, which President Obama did and stated clearly, that's entirely acceptable because they like him. But they don't like President Trump. Therefore, anything he does is subject to their scrutiny, and they are fully invested in undermining every action he takes.
Wow. You're exactly right. We're talking with Congressman Rick Crawford. I agree with your take on what's going on, and I'm glad that 80% of your district is supportive and saying hold firm, build the wall. To talk a little bit about, we have illegal immigration, we have illegal aliens here, and they have killed American citizens. And I know we're in the midst of a government shutdown, and I know there's federal workers who are not getting their paychecks today, and I feel for them. I know that's got to be bad. I know you've got mortgage payments coming up and due and everything else, and that's awful. On the other hand, though, if it is a crisis, and it's not only a humanitarian crisis, it's in some places the southern border is some of the most violent places, on the planet. And you have the fentanyl, you have the heroin, you have the sex and human trafficking that's going on. In order to address that, in order to try to stop that, it may require some sacrifice and people don't get their paychecks. But at least they're not one of these grieving families that's lost a loved one because we can't secure our border.
Well, you raised some good points there, and the drug trafficking issue in and of itself is something that you just can't overstate. There are, I think there were somewhere in the neighborhood of 70,000 fatalities due to overdose. Last year, we're on track to have even more this year. It's an unbelievable problem that people are until it affects you personally, you're probably not as aware of it, but it's going to start affecting more people personally because fentanyl is the scourge of humanity. And if you thought meth was bad, wait till you start seeing people getting their hands on fentanyl. And it requires less. They can bring more in because it requires less quantity, and the dosage requires so small to be lethal. But the amount of fentanyl brought into this country is staggering. And where's it coming from? About 95% of it coming across the southern border. And so we need to be diligent about this, not just diligent, but proactive and doing everything we can to stop it. Not just, reduce it a little bit and say, hey, we're fighting the war on drugs. We could talk for hours about the war on drugs and what is being done, what isn't being done, what should have been done for years, what's being allowed to happen for optics, things like that.
Well,
the fact of the matter is,
I was watching. I think Sarah Carter, the reporter journalist, she was down at the border yesterday doing a live Twitter, and so one of the people there that was supporting the president. He leaned in the camera and he said, "There's never been a war on drugs. If there was an actual war on drugs, this border would have been secure a long time ago." And I thought, wow, I've never even thought of it that way.
Well, absolutely. And this is my point. There are things going on in northern Mexico that I'm privy to that I can't share. That if the average American citizen knew about it, we wouldn't be having this conversation. We would have locked it down long ago, without question. But the problem is, most of these lawmakers aren't aware of it, and they choose to use this as a tool for political purposes. Really kind of investing in the knowledge that if they give immigrants that come across the border illegally, if they give them a full complement of benefits, and they roll out the red carpet and welcome them to the country, even though they've come in illegally, and they give them that status, that the payoff is going to be political power for them. And let's just be honest about it. And so they don't want to, just like Nancy Pelosi flat out refused to hear the brief from Secretary Nielsen last week, refused to hear it as she was presenting the details of the border statistics. She would not let her speak because they don't want. Once they know the truth, there's no defense of their position. So they don't want to know the truth.
Wow.
What they want to know is, what do I need to do to further this narrative so that I can ensure my own political longevity, and that is the problem.
Last question, Congressman Crawford. Do you think President Obama or President Trump will declare national emergency, and at this point, should he?
Well, I don't know what other option he has, quite frankly. If we have a leadership cadre on the Democrat side that is unwilling to address this forthrightly and with any degree of intellectual honesty, then it's really kind of on him. And quite frankly, I think he's shown remarkable forbearance in not doing that up to this point. But after today, I don't know what else he can do. I honestly think that he's going to do this maybe by the end of the day. Although I don't like this route necessarily, I don't see any other options. I agree with Lindsey Graham on this. What else are you going to do? If the other side refuses to even engage, she flat out says, I will not give you one thin dime for border security. Then what are you going to do? I mean, he's got a responsibility to the American people, and whether the American people necessarily like it or not, in this case they do overwhelmingly, but even if they didn't, sometimes you've got to do things that are in the interest of, look, sometimes you got to ground your kids because they've done some things they shouldn't have done, and I'm not suggesting that we equate this. We're talking about a population that's entitled to their opinion and things like this. But if we don't secure our borders, our sovereignty is being challenged by these non-state actors. And think about this: the cartels in 2016, I believe 2016 or 2017 rather, $600 billion in known revenue. That's what we know of, and that's like a small country. $600 billion. I mean, there are countries that would probably love to have that as their GDP.
Wow. Gosh.
And that's what we're up against. And the other thing that also is to their advantage is they don't have any regulatory regime that prevents them from acting whenever and wherever they want. And so that's what we're up against. And I'm going to tell you, folks, we've got to wake up to this problem. We've got to wake up quick.
Congressman Rick Crawford, I'm proud to call you my congressman. Thank you for the work that you're doing on this, and thank you for coming on the program this morning.
You bet. Anytime. Thanks, Paul.
All righty.